Let me thank you ahead of time. You're guarding us all from the perils beyond the wall. Wildlings and White Walkers and whatnot. We're grateful to have good, strong men like you protecting us. Is it we already? Have you taken your vows then?
Soon enough.
Give my regards to the Night's Watch. I'm sure it will be thrilling to serve in such an elite force. And if not, it's only for life.
Jaime Lannister has had one of the most epic and redeeming arcs in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. Starting out as the crimson-clad bad boy of House Lannister, he quickly becomes, to me at least, easily the most hated, and he kind of made me wonder if he's going to become the big bad of the series. Then we enter Season 3. Throughout this season, Jaime is pretty much tried and tested as a future sympathetic person that we care about in the show. Remember, this is the season where he has his hand removed by Locke, and then afterwards, you know, he's tortured and forced to ride with his hand tied around his neck. This is pretty traumatic for anybody. And then finally, when he feels like he may, you know, make a break for it, he falls off of his horse, falls into the mud. They give him horse piss to drink, and then Jaime fights off, you know, these guys have delirious. That arc alone made me care about what happens to this dude. In this video, I want to discuss the role of Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones Season 8 and how his journey will end. Before we get started, please slap a like on this video. The like goal is going to be 420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then make sure you have your notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long nights. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I really didn't start giving a shit about Jaime Lannister up until he lost his hand. Now, if you read the books and the novels, the significance of losing a hand in George R. R. Martin's work, it usually means a drastic change is coming for a character. Just for example, you know, we have Theon. He really didn't become Reek until his fingers were flayed, which basically broke down the rest of that remnants of personality that was Theon, and by flaying his fingers, that made him turn into Reek. And we also have Great John Umber, who this actually happened in the TV show. Great John Umber didn't really respect Robb as King of the North until Robb's direwolf Grey Wolf savages his hand. Then he starts to respect Robb and proclaims him King of the North. Then we also have, you know, Qhorin Halfhand, who didn't become a good swordsman until his left hand was, you know, partially removed. Another example is of Davos. Before, you know, Stannis removes partial fingers from Davos, he was a smuggler. And once this happened to Davos, it basically made him become an upstanding citizen, and he ended up becoming a knight. One of the last examples I want to give is from A Game of Thrones. In the books, and this sort of happens to Jon Snow on the show, but not exactly the same way. But while Jon is fighting off the White in order to protect Lord Commander Mormont, he ends up grabbing this flaming tapestry that's hanging on the wall, and in doing so, he ends up injuring his hand so bad for the rest of his journey throughout the books, he remembers this injury and remembers this was his first encounter with whites. So we can take away from that Jon Snow having this burned hand that, you know, this injury still plagues him throughout the series of the books is a reminder that Jon Snow was forever changed that night that he encountered the very first white. Just on a little side note here, but we can take this even further and realize that since Jon Snow is a true Targaryen, the fact that he was burned by fire may keep him from going completely insane and realizing that fire burns and harms others, and this may prevent him from going full-on Dragon Lord and burning everything. So what I took away from all that is the fact that hands in A Song of Ice and Fire and in George's work, they symbolize power, and sometimes if a character has too much power or needs to be taught a serious lesson, their hand gets injured. And then shortly thereafter, there's some sort of crazy arc that makes them completely have a 180 turnaround from who they were previously as a character. So let's bring this back to Jaime Lannister. Right now in the books, Jaime is on his way to be somewhat potentially executed by Lady Stoneheart, and he's being led there by Bran. So his journey on the TV show, the way it ends, is probably going to be completely different. Maybe all around in the whole picture it'll be similar, but as of right now, you know, his journey is almost on a completely different path, aside from the fact that he's headed to the Starks in both situations. But for Jaime, in my opinion, that right hand being removed took away all of his power. And we do have major, you know, symbolism for another symbolism for the hand as being the hand of the king, and that being, you know, the right way or the willful way of the king and symbolic of most of the king's power. Well, Jaime's not the type to serve his hand to the king, and the fact that Jaime had his right hand, which is, you know, his hand of power removed, I don't think Jaime's journey will end up with him being in a position of power. Well, let me backtrack for a second. I guess it's to say what some would consider a position of power, because as of right now, the Night's Watch isn't exactly a desirable place to go, and usually they have to raid the cells to fill their ranks. And yes, like I showed at the beginning of this video, there is clear foreshadowing for Jaime Lannister to join the Night's Watch. That conversation that he has with Jon Snow about how, you know, don't worry about being in the Night's Watch, it's only till death, was clear foreshadowing that his character may end up eventually serving at the Night's Watch, and maybe because of his status, rising up to becoming Lord Commander. You know, there's a bunch of foreshadowing in the novels, like there is foreshadowing for everything, but one of the biggest things is that Barristan Selmy, you know, at first thinks that Jaime is a little bit too young to join the Kingsguard, but then, you know, after what happens with Tywin and Mad King Aerys, Barristan tells Jaime that maybe he should trade in his white coat for a black. Also, we have the fact that a lot of people think that Jon Snow and Jaime Lannister's story arcs are sort of like, you know, very parallel. We have Jaime Lannister working, starting off at the top and then working his way to the bottom, but still in his mind, he's doing the right thing, so that's the right place for him to go. You have Jon Snow starting off at the bottom and eventually going to Game of Thrones Season 8, and maybe, in A Dream of Spring, him sitting on the Iron Throne. But like I said before, Jaime had his right hand removed, so in my opinion, that's foreshadowing to the fact that his journey will end not in a position of power. So him being the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch maybe doesn't make the most sense, although I do love the parallel of him trading in his white cloak for a black one. Another option for Jaime Lannister's fate to play out in Season 8, and George loves this kind of ending, is it for it to not be, you know, very epic or meaningful in the big picture. Like, in the moments, it may seem right for Jaime to do this, but overall, there could have been a million more options, and maybe this is how Jaime goes out. In my opinion, this is one of the most likely ways. Like, maybe, for instance, Jaime teams up with the Starks, they give him a side mission of going to go and take care of Cersei Lannister once and for all, and he understands that Cersei is not long for this world, and neither is he, and, you know, very similar to how his mindset is in the books right now, which is that Cersei's an evil cunt, they came into this world together, maybe they need to go out together. So let's just say there's a situation where Jon Snow sends Jaime Lannister on this mission to go and take care of Cersei, and of course, Jaime will need people to go with him as volunteers. This is where you have Brienne standing up and being like, look, I'll go with you. Then you also maybe have Sandor and Arya. You know, one way that scenario could play out is by the time they get to King's Landing, everything's successful in getting to Cersei, and then maybe Brienne dies in the arms of Jaime, and this makes Jaime fully accept his destiny, which is to run his spear through the mountain, which will then spear Cersei, and then everyone in that scene just sort of dies, and then it fades to black, and then Arya is able to escape with their life. Something very similar to that may go down, although personally, I don't want to see Jaime's journey end with Cersei. I think that they are, you know, completely different individuals, and I would honestly like to see the last time those two were ever on screen together, unless, you know, their two dead bodies are next to each other, was when Jaime left Cersei. Cersei was going to have him killed right then and there by the mountain if Jaime had waited any longer. So I want to see Jaime's journey end up north with the Starks. Just a little side note here, in the books, Jaime Lannister's hand is described a little bit differently than how it is on the show, you know, with the straight up being golden hand. In the books, he has a mother of pearl fingernails, which I think would have been pretty cool for them to include on the TV show, but also, it's said that his hand is pretty sturdy, and he's able to clumsily strap a shield onto it. Now, I don't really know how much good a shield is going to do, you know, on horseback, because Jaime's definitely not an up-close, hand-to-hand type fighter. If he did, he would get destroyed. Now, he might be able to take out a few whites, but ultimately, if a White Walker gets a hold of him, he's toast. So I don't think he's going to be strapping a shield on his hand, but where he's headed, to Jon Snow's camp to the north, is Gendry. Gendry is a blacksmith who was trained by Tobel Mott, and Tobel Mott can rework Valyrian steel. He's one of the only few blacksmiths that can do this. So who's to say he didn't pass that skill on to Gendry? Now, I don't think that Jaime is going to be getting his golden hand coated in Valyrian steel, because there's just not that much of it. I do think that he may trade in his sword to maybe make some daggers for some of the other heroes, but what he can do is have Gendry fashion some sort of obsidian tipped, or dragonglass rather, tipped knuckles, or maybe just make his entire hand out of obsidian. This would of course make him pretty formidable against the whites, and who's to say they don't just light it on fire, making Jaime the one-punch fireman of Game of Thrones. Now, just sort of reeling it back in here for a second, Jaime Lannister throughout this entire story, and still to this very day, is called the Kingslayer. Well, back in Season 7 and Episode 4, Jaime Lannister tried to do just that, except for he wanted to change his name to Queenslayer. Remember, he grabbed a spear and ran full on towards Daenerys to try to puncture her to her dragon. Even though he knew that he was going to die, he thought that it would end the war right then and there. If he killed the queen, the rest of these troops would go home, and he was willing to do this. And I think we all know that there's one word that pops into mind when you think about this scene now in its context: Foreshadowing. I predict that Jaime Lannister will again mount a horse, will again grab a spear, this time tipped with dragonglass, and maybe some point in the battle of next season, the Night King becomes dismounted from his dragon. They both come crashing to the ground, and Jaime Lannister is the one who sacrifices himself, full on running towards the Night King to spear him, piercing him to him and his dragon, and then maybe Jon and Dany come and finish the job. Jaime Lannister is an awesome character, and I do hope that his journey in Season 8 gets its just desserts. We do have the leaked information that he is supposedly only supposed to star in 4 episodes, so if the Night King is taken out by episode 4, then maybe Jaime ends up taking him out, which would make sense as why he doesn't appear in the last 2 episodes. Now I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. Please slap a like on it, as the like goal is going to be 428. Also, super special shout out to Mario, Terry, and Jimmy. They are the executive producers of these videos, and with their support and all of my supporters over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews, I would not be able to make these kinds of videos. So I want to take some time to thank them and thank you as well for watching. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts, Defender of the Long Night Reviews. Real quick, and then I'm out of here. If you guys enjoyed this and you want me to make more videos like these, you know, discussing the fate of maybe Jon Snow, Daenerys, and Sansa, let me know down below in the comment section. I've already started on the Jon Snow one though.